I signed the IVF papers. Then his mistress texted, "Did he get the money yet?" And suddenly, our baby wasn't a baby, it was someone's payout. I was sitting in the parking lot outside Prairie Ridge Fertility Center in Wichita, Kansas, holding a folder full of consent forms, medication instructions, and costs I was trying not to panic about. My husband had left his phone in the cup holder because he had just used it to show me an email from the clinic. Then he went back inside to use the bathroom. I wasn't suspicious that morning. I was exhausted. I was emotional. I was trying to believe IVF was our fresh start. Then his phone buzzed. The message preview said, "Did he get the money yet?" I stared at it, confused, thinking it had to be about work. My husband was a consultant, and his messages were always vague enough to sound important without saying anything. But before I could look away, another message came through. "I hate that she gets the baby before I do." My whole body went cold. The baby, before I do. I looked down at my own stomach even though there was no baby there. Not yet. Maybe not ever. We had been trying for almost 3 years. 2 failed IUIs. Dozens of appointments. Blood work. Pills. Shots. Calendars. Smiling through other people's pregnancy announcements while going home and crying in the shower. IVF was supposed to be the thing we were scared of together. And now some woman was texting my husband like my body was part of a race. When he came back to the car, he smiled like nothing was wrong. "You okay?" he asked. I handed him his phone without looking at him. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." He believed me because he wanted to. That was the first thing I understood that day. Liars don't always miss the truth because they are careless. Sometimes they miss it because they are used to you protecting the lie for them. My name is Claire Wood. I'm 34, and I work as an editor at a small publishing office in Wichita. My husband, Hank Ward, was 36 and worked as a consultant. We had been married for almost 8 years, and for most of that time, I really thought we were ordinary. Not perfect. Not movie romance perfect. But stable. Safe. The kind of couple that fought about dishes and money and whose turn it was to call the plumber, then still went to bed with our feet touching. But infertility changes the air inside a marriage. It turns every small thing into evidence. Every late period becomes hope. Every negative test becomes grief. Every well-meaning comment from family feels like a slap. Hank's family made it worse without always meaning to. His parents, Earl and Eve Ward, lived outside Salt Lake City, Utah, in a large brick house that looked warm from the outside, but always made me feel like I was being quietly evaluated. Earl was a director who oversaw commercial rental properties and investments. Eve was an author, the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, sent handwritten cards, and somehow made every compliment sound like a test. Hank's younger brother, Ian, was a programmer. His wife, Faye, was a nutritionist. They had 2 kids, Owen and Mia, and the Ward family revolved around those children. I don't blame the kids. They were sweet. Owen was loud and curious. Mia was shy and always carried a stuffed rabbit. But every family dinner became another reminder that Ian had given Earl and Eve what Hank hadn't. A legacy. A last name. Grandchildren for the photo wall. 2 weeks before the fertility clinic, we visited Hank's parents near Salt Lake City for the weekend. I didn't want to go. I was already anxious about IVF, but Hank said his mother had been asking about us, and he wanted one normal family weekend before everything got intense. Dinner was roast chicken, wine I didn't drink, and conversation I tried to survive. Owen was telling Earl about school, and Earl laughed in that deep, proud way I had only ever heard around his grandchildren. Then Earl looked at Hank and said, "Children change a man. They make him think beyond himself." Hank's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Eve smiled at me and said, "We're praying this works for you too." It would be lovely to see Hank step into that season of life. That season of life. Like I was a doorway he needed to walk through. I forced a smile. "We're hopeful." Hank didn't say anything. Later, in the guest room, while I was folding my clothes into the same overnight bag I'd had since college, I asked, "Why did you get quiet at dinner?" He shrugged. "My dad just knows how to make everything sound like a performance review." Did he mean anything by it? No, Hank said too quickly. He just thinks once we have a kid, he'll stop seeing me as the screw-up. That made me turn around. "You're not the screw-up." He gave a dry laugh. "You don't know how he looks at Ian." I did know. Everyone knew. Ian was stable, successful, fertile, and calm. Hank was charming, restless, and always chasing the next thing that would finally make him feel important. But I didn't say that. I walked over and put my arms around him. "We're not having a baby for your father," I said. He hugged me back, but his body felt stiff. "Of course not," he said. That should have stayed with me longer than it did. After we got back to Wichita, Hank became strangely focused on the cost of IVF. Not worried in a normal way. More like impatient. He asked how soon the clinic needed payment. He asked what insurance would cover. He asked what happened if we paused. He asked whether the clinic could give us documentation of treatment. At first, I thought he was trying to be practical. Money was stressful. Fertility treatment is expensive even when insurance helps. So when he asked questions, I answered them. When he wanted copies of forms, I sent them. When he said his father might help more if he saw we were serious, I wanted to believe that meant emotional support. Then came the text in the parking lot. I didn't confront him that day because I didn't know enough yet. I only knew something was wrong, and I had learned the hard way that if you accuse someone too soon, they clean up the evidence before you understand the truth. So I waited. That night, Hank acted normal. He made pasta. He kissed the top of my head while I stood at the sink. He asked if I had taken my prenatal vitamins. I almost dropped the glass in my hand. Yeah, I said. Good, he said. We need to do everything right. Everything right. I went to bed beside him and stared at the ceiling while he slept. The next morning, I used his tablet. I know this is where some people will say I crossed a line. Maybe I did. But by then, the line had already been dragged through my marriage and across my body. His messages were synced to the tablet. I sat at the kitchen table before work, hands shaking, and opened the thread from the woman. Her name was Iris Young. She worked as a trainer at Riverline Fitness Studio in Wichita, which explained the sudden gym phase Hank had started 6 months earlier. I used to tease him for buying new workout clothes and protein powder. I used to say, look at you, becoming a fitness guy. He would laugh and say, just trying to keep up. Apparently, he was keeping up with her. The messages went back months. Not a mistake. Not one bad night. Not flirting that got out of hand. Months. She knew he was married. She knew we were trying to have a baby. She knew about the clinic, the failed treatments, and the planned IVF. Not every medical detail, but enough. Enough to know I wasn't some cold wife he had already left. Enough to know he was going home to me after seeing her. Some messages were pathetic. She wrote, you looked miserable when you talked about the appointment. He wrote, I'm trapped until I know what happens. She wrote, you said your dad would help once there's a baby. He wrote, he will. He always respects Ian more because Ian gave them grandkids. She wrote, so if she gets pregnant, you stay? He wrote, for a while. I have to. Once things are settled, I can figure it out. I stopped breathing for a second. For a while. I have to. Like I was a lease he couldn't break yet. I kept scrolling. Then I found the message that broke something clean in me. Iris wrote, what if IVF works before you can leave? Hank replied, then it works. My dad sees I'm serious, and he finally loosens up. I just need the first one. Then I can breathe. I read that message again and again until the words blurred. The first one. Not our child. Not our baby. The first one. Like a password. Like a ticket. Like a proof of purchase. I sat at the kitchen table in my work clothes, with my coffee going cold beside me, and realized my husband had not just cheated on me. He had taken the most painful, private, vulnerable part of my life and turned it into a strategy. He wanted a baby with me because it might make his father respect him. He wanted Iris because she made him feel wanted without responsibility. He wanted his family's money, his father's approval, my body, and her attention. He wanted everything, and he wanted no consequences. I should have screamed. I should have woken him up. I should have thrown the tablet at him and demanded answers. Instead, I took pictures of the messages with my phone. I sent copies to myself. Then I closed the tablet and went to work. I don't remember most of that day. I remember sitting at my desk pretending to edit a chapter while the same sentence sat on my screen for an hour. I remember my coworker asking if I wanted coffee and me saying no even though I desperately needed something to hold. I remember going into the bathroom, locking the stall, and pressing my fist to my mouth so no one would hear me cry. At lunch, I called my friend Beth. Beth Lane was a counselor, which meant she had a professional voice for emergencies and a friend voice for when she wanted to curse someone out. When she answered, I said, I found messages. She didn't ask stupid questions. She just said, where are you? Work. Can you leave? No. Okay. Then breathe first. Don't confront him at work. Don't confront him while you're shaking. Tell me what you know. So I told her. Not everything. I couldn't say everything out loud yet, but enough. Beth was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Claire, you need to pause the IVF. Hearing someone else say it made my chest cave in. I know. No embryo transfer. No injections if you haven't started. No more medical steps until you know what you're doing. I wiped my face with toilet paper because I hadn't brought tissues. We signed today. Signing isn't the same as continuing. He'll say I'm punishing him. Beth's voice got firmer. You're protecting yourself. That afternoon, I called Prairie Ridge Fertility Center from my car. Pearl Wallace, the clinic receptionist and coordinator, answered with her usual calm voice. Prairie Ridge Fertility, this is Pearl. I almost hung up. Instead, I said, hi, this is Claire Wood. I need to pause my IVF cycle before starting injections. Pearl paused, but only for a second. Of course. Are you safe? That question nearly destroyed me. I stared at the steering wheel and whispered, yes. Do you want us to note that the patient requested a pause and that no further medication schedule should be released until you confirm? Yes, I said. Please. She didn't pry. She didn't judge. She just told me what would happen next, what would be paused, and that I could call back when I was ready. When I hung up, I sat in the parking lot and cried so hard my throat hurt. Not because I regretted pausing. Because I had spent years fighting for a baby with a man I suddenly couldn't trust to be a father. That evening, Hank came home with takeout like we were normal. Got your favorite, he said, holding up a paper bag. I looked at him standing in our kitchen, smiling, still wearing his wedding ring, still acting like he hadn't called our future child the first one. I wanted to ask him who Iris was. I wanted to ask him how long. I wanted to ask if he pictured my face when he told another woman he was trapped. But I had one more thing to do first. I needed Iris to know exactly what kind of man she thought she had won. So after Hank fell asleep, I sat on the bathroom floor with my phone in my hand and typed a message to my husband's mistress. Hi, this is his wife. We need to talk. His mistress didn't reply right away. For almost 3 hours, I sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub, staring at my phone like it could tell me what kind of woman I had become. My husband was asleep in our bed, breathing softly like he hadn't just destroyed the safest part of my life. Every few minutes, I checked to make sure the screenshots were still saved. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid they would disappear, and I would have to convince myself I wasn't crazy. At 12:47 a.m., my phone finally buzzed. She wrote, "I don't think this is appropriate." I laughed so sharply I had to cover my mouth. Appropriate. That was the word she chose. I typed back, "You're sleeping with my husband while he's going through IVF with me. We passed appropriate months ago." She didn't answer. So I sent one screenshot. Not the worst one. Just enough. The message where she asked if his father would help once there was a baby. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. I stared at her name, even though I had never saved it. Just the number. Just the woman who knew about my marriage from the inside. I answered. Her voice was younger than I expected. Not young like a girl, but younger than the version I had built in my head. Nervous, defensive, breathless. She said, "He told me you knew things were over." I closed my eyes. That sentence was so basic it almost bored me. Every mistress says some version of it, I think. The marriage was dead. The wife was cold. The husband was trapped. Nobody is ever just selfish in their own story. I said, "He was beside me this morning while I signed IVF consent forms." She went quiet. I kept going because once I started, I couldn't stop. He sleeps in our bed. He kisses me before work. He asks if I took my prenatal vitamins. He sat in the clinic holding my hand while we talked about injections. So if he told you it was over, he lied to both of us. She said, "He said you were obsessed with having a baby." That one landed deep. Not because it was true, but because there was enough pain around it for him to twist. I had cried over negative tests. I had tracked cycles. I had begged my body to do something it wouldn't do. And somehow he had turned that into a character flaw. I said, "I wanted a baby with my husband." That is not the same thing as being obsessed. She didn't respond. Then she said, softer, "He told me his family pressured him." They did, I said. But pressure doesn't make someone cheat. Pressure doesn't make someone discuss my body like a family investment. Her breathing changed. I knew she was crying or trying not to. I should have felt satisfaction. A cleaner kind of revenge. But honestly, it felt ugly. It felt like standing in a burning house and throwing gasoline at the only other person trapped inside. Still, I kept talking. I told her about his parents near Salt Lake City. About his brother having 2 children. About the way his father praised men who built families. About how Hank had always felt second best and how he had turned that insecurity into a reason to use me. Then I sent more screenshots. The one where he said he was trapped until he knew what happened. The one where she asked if he would stay if IVF worked. The one where he wrote, "I just need the first one. Then I can breathe." This time, she made a sound like someone had hit her. She whispered, "He told me he wanted a baby with me." I said, "He wants a baby with whoever gets him rewarded first." It was cruel. I know it was cruel. But I meant it. She started crying harder then. She said he had promised he would leave after the cycle. She said he told her he only went to appointments because I was fragile. She said he told her he didn't want to hurt me but couldn't abandon me while I was unstable. That word made me sit up straight. Unstable. I had been grieving. I had been medicated. I had been hopeful and scared and tired. And he had used all of it to make me sound pathetic to another woman. I said, "Do you understand that he would have stayed if I got pregnant?" She didn't answer. "Do you understand he was still trying to create a child with me while telling you that you were his future?" She whispered, "I didn't know it was like this. You knew he was married." She went silent. That silence was the closest thing to honesty she gave me. I didn't scream at her. I didn't call her names. I wanted to, but I didn't. Maybe because I had already lost too much dignity that week and wanted to keep one piece of myself. I said, "You can do whatever you want with this. Believe him. Leave him." Confront him. I don't care anymore. But I'm done being a body in his plan. Then I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had printed the screenshots at work before anyone else came in. I organized them by date because apparently heartbreak made me practical. I put them in a folder and slid it into my tote bag. Then I called Rose Brooks. Rose was not an attorney. She was a consultant who helped people organize documents for separations, small claims, and complicated personal messes before they brought everything to the right professional. Beth had recommended her quietly, with a warning that Rose was blunt. Rose answered on the second ring. I said, I need help organizing proof before I speak to a lawyer. She said, is there a safety issue? No. Money issue? Maybe. Infidelity? Yes. Children? I swallowed. No. That's the problem. She was quiet for half a second, then said, come by at 4. At 4, I sat across from Rose in a small office that smelled like printer paper and peppermint gum. I handed her the folder. She didn't gasp. She didn't make dramatic faces. She just read, sorted, and asked clean questions. Joint accounts? Yes. Shared property? Our house is rented. Debt? Some medical bills. Credit cards, mostly normal. IVF payments? Not completed. I paused the cycle before starting injections. Rose looked up. Good. That one word almost made me cry. Good. For the first time in days, someone made me feel like I had done something sane. She told me to save everything in 2 places, change passwords, check bank statements, and speak to an actual divorce attorney before making any big financial moves. She told me not to threaten him, not to post online, not to send screenshots to everyone while angry. Then she paused and said, but you should expect him to panic. I said, why? Because men like this don't fear hurting you. They fear losing control of the story. She was right. When I got home, Hank's car was already in the driveway. That was unusual. He normally came home late on Thursdays, always claiming client dinners or gym sessions. Now he was standing in the kitchen, pale, with his phone in his hand. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask about my day. He said, what did you do? There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, can we talk? Not even, I can explain. Just, what did you do? I set my tote bag on the kitchen chair and looked at him. I told her the truth. His face twisted. You had no right to drag her into this. I stared at him because for a second, I truly couldn't believe he had said it. You dragged her into this when you slept with her. He pointed at me like I was the dangerous one. You don't know what I told her. You don't know what she's going through. That almost broke the calm right out of me. What she's going through? I said. I was signing IVF papers while she was asking if your father had money for you. He looked away. That tiny movement told me he knew exactly what I had seen. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out the folder, and placed it on the kitchen table. He looked at it like it was alive. What is that? Your messages. His mouth opened, then closed. I said, I paused the IVF cycle. His face changed completely. Not grief. Not shame. Panic. You what? I called the clinic. I paused it before starting injections. You can't just make that decision without me. I laughed, but it came out cold. About my body? Watch me. He dragged both hands through his hair. Claire, we were in the middle of something important. No, I said. I was in the middle of something important. You were running 2 women through the same plan. He flinched. Good. He said, that's not fair. I opened the folder and slid 1 page toward him. It was the screenshot where he wrote, I just need the first one. Then explain this fairly. He didn't touch the paper. For a long time, he just stood there breathing hard. Then the performance started. He sat down. He put his head in his hands. His voice cracked. He said he was confused. He said he felt like a failure. He said his father had made him feel worthless for years. He said every time Ian's kids were praised, he felt like he had fallen behind in a race nobody admitted they were running. And the worst part was, some of it was probably true. That is what makes betrayal so messy. Monsters don't always lie about their pain. Sometimes they tell the truth about their pain and still use it as a weapon. He said, I didn't know how to handle the pressure. I said, so you cheated. He said, it wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple. He looked up, crying now. Real tears, I think. Or close enough that I once would have held him. I love you, he said. I wanted that sentence to matter. I wanted it to reach some part of me that still believed our marriage was hiding under all this damage, waiting to be rescued. But all I could think about was his message. The first one. I asked, if I got pregnant next month, would you have stayed because you loved me or because your father would finally respect you? He looked at me. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The silence did what his confession never could. It answered me. I nodded once. Okay. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. He said, please don't do this. I'm not doing this, I said. I'm finally stopping it. That night, I slept in the guest room with a chair pushed under the doorknob. Not because I thought he would hurt me, I didn't. But because I needed one locked door between his crying and my weakness. The fallout started the next morning. Iris apparently confronted him before breakfast. I know because he took the call in the backyard, and even through the glass, I heard him begging. His voice rose, then dropped, then rose again. At one point he turned and saw me watching from the kitchen. He looked furious. Like I had ruined his affair. Not like he had ruined our marriage. Later that day, his mother called me. Eve's voice was tight and formal. Hank says you canceled treatment and that there has been a misunderstanding. I almost admired the wording. A misunderstanding. Like I had misplaced a receipt. I said I paused IVF because Hank has been having an affair. She went silent. Then she said, "Are you sure?" I sent her 3 screenshots. Only 3. The message about being trapped. The message about needing the first one. The message where Iris asked if his father would help once there was a baby. I didn't send the sexual messages. I didn't send the cruel ones. I didn't need to. Eve called back 20 minutes later, crying. "I'm so sorry," she said. And the strange thing is, I believed her. Then Earl called. I expected anger at me. I expected defensiveness. I expected some speech about family privacy. Instead, he sounded old. He said, "Claire, did he tell you I promised him money for a child?" I said, "He suggested it." Earl exhaled hard. I made comments I shouldn't have. I've helped Ian more because he has children, yes. College accounts. Family support. Things like that. But I never told Hank to produce a child for money. If he believed that, he turned my pride into something ugly. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to blame Earl. Part of me still does. Families don't create pressure out of nowhere, and men like Hank don't become desperate for approval in a vacuum. But Earl hadn't made him cheat. Earl hadn't made him call a future baby the first one. That was Hank. Earl said, "He will not be rewarded for this." That sentence stayed with me. Because somehow, even after everything, I think Hank had believed there would still be a way to turn disaster into profit. A sad husband. A fragile wife. A family scandal. Maybe he thought his parents would pay to smooth it over. They didn't. 2 weeks later, Hank moved into a short-term rental. He told people we were taking space. I didn't correct everyone, but I corrected enough. Not with a public post. Not with drama. Just with the truth when someone asked. No, we were not taking space. No, IVF was not continuing. No, I was not okay. Yes, he had an affair. No, there was no baby. That last part hurt every time. I met with a real attorney a week after he moved out. The divorce itself was not glamorous. There were no courtroom speeches. No dramatic confession. Just paperwork, bank statements, medical bills, and the quiet humiliation of separating your life from someone who once knew how you liked your coffee. I moved into a smaller apartment across town. The water pressure was awful, and the kitchen cabinet stuck, but the living room had wide windows that caught the morning light. The first night there, I slept on a mattress on the floor and cried because nobody was lying beside me. Then I cried because nobody was lying beside me. Both things were true. I blocked Iris after she sent one long message about how Hank had manipulated her too. Maybe he did. Maybe he lied to her in ways I will never know. But she knew I existed. She knew about the fertility treatments. She knew enough to ask if my pregnancy would happen before hers. I never replied. Beth helped me unpack. At one point, she held up the unopened box of prenatal vitamins from my bathroom and asked, "Do you want me to throw these away?" I couldn't answer. So she put them in a drawer. I still haven't opened that drawer. Hank tried to come back twice. The first time, he sent an email with the subject line, "Please read." It was long. Too long. Full of therapy words I don't think he fully understood. Accountability. Fear. Family wounds. Shame patterns. He said he had started counseling. He said Iris meant nothing. He said losing me made him see what mattered. I didn't respond. The second time, he showed up outside my apartment with flowers. I hated that he looked bad. Thinner. Tired. Less polished. Some weak part of me wanted him to look evil, because evil is easier to leave. But he just looked like a man who had burned down his life and finally felt the heat. He said, "We can still be a family." That sentence almost brought me to my knees. Because for years, that was all I wanted. A family. With him. A child in the little room at the end of the hall. Tiny socks in the laundry. Sleep deprivation. Christmas cards. A stroller by the front door. A future that made all the needles and appointments and tears feel worth it. But then I remembered. He had not wanted a family. He had wanted proof. He had wanted his father's approval, his mistress's admiration, my body, and a child he could hold up like evidence that he had finally become the right kind of man. So I said, "No. You wanted an heir. You wanted a payout. You wanted to beat your brother. You never wanted a family with me." His face hardened. That's cruel. Maybe it was. But cruelty feels different when it is finally pointed away from yourself. 6 months later, the divorce is still moving. Slowly. Annoyingly. Expensively. Hank is not with Iris anymore. Jill Bryant, a photographer who knew people from Riverline Fitness Studio, told me Iris quit after the story got around. I didn't ask for details, but people gave them anyway. Apparently, she tried to paint herself as another victim, and maybe some people believed her. I don't care as much as I thought I would. Earl and Eve send occasional messages. Eve mailed me a handwritten note that said she was sorry for the pressure she put on me. I kept it, but I haven't answered. Ian sent one short message too. He said he was sorry Hank made children feel like a competition. That one made me cry. I have not restarted fertility treatments. Maybe I will one day. Maybe I won't. Right now, my body feels like mine for the first time in years. Not a schedule. Not a project. Not a failed attempt. Not a promise to someone else's family. Just mine. Some mornings, I wake up in my apartment with a bad shower and the beautiful light, and I feel peaceful. Other mornings, grief hits before I even open my eyes. I still catch myself touching my stomach sometimes. Not because there was ever a baby there, but because I had made so much room in my heart for one. That is the hardest part to explain. I didn't just lose my husband. I lost the imaginary child I had been brave enough to hope for. I lost the version of motherhood I thought was waiting right after one more appointment, one more injection, one more bill, one more painful month. And I lost the version of myself who thought love meant enduring quietly until things got better. But I also gained something I didn't expect. I gained the ability to hear silence as an answer. When Hank couldn't tell me he would have stayed for love, that silence saved me. When he panicked over the paused IVF instead of apologizing for the affair, that panic saved me. When his first question was, "What did you do?" instead of, "How badly did I hurt you?" that question saved me. I used to think revenge had to be loud. Now I think sometimes revenge is just refusing to continue the lie. I didn't destroy Hank. I didn't destroy Iris. I showed them the truth they were already standing in, and I stepped out before they could drag a child into it. Still, I know I wasn't pure. I wanted Iris hurt. I wanted Hank abandoned. I wanted them to lose each other the same day I lost the marriage I thought I had. I wanted his parents to know. I wanted his father to look at him differently. I wanted consequences to arrive wearing my name. So I'm asking honestly. Was I wrong for sending his mistress the screenshots and pausing IVF without giving my husband a chance to explain first, or was that the only sane thing left to do after they turned my future baby into his payout?